All right, well, thank you guys for those who braved the weather and made it out to the library today, and also those who are joining us on our Facebook stream so that they can still see the presentation tonight. I'm going to turn it over to the land bank so they can kind of introduce what's going to be presented, and then we'll introduce our speakers.
Hello, welcome. I'm Margot Thorpe, and I'm with the Land Bank, and I want to thank the library for partnering with us tonight on this event, and thank you for joining us for Birding 101. I also want to thank the San Juan Islands Audubon and its president, Tyler Davis, for giving the presentation tonight. So we have put together a bunch of programming kind of based around the Great Backyard Bird Count, which is happening this month. It happens every year in February, and this year its dates are February 14th through 17th. And basically during those dates, people worldwide of all ages get outside to watch birds, to identify birds, and then to use apps like eBird and Merlin to submit the birds that they see, and then that data is collected, and scientists can look at that data to see bird populations throughout the world, and it's really helpful citizen science. So it's really easy to participate in the backyard bird count. Basically, during those days in February, you just need to get outside, watch for and identify birds, and you can do this on your own or with a group, and you can do this in your backyard or on a trail, like a land bank preserve possibly is a great spot to go visit and watch for birds. So we have this talk tonight. The land bank is also hosting some bird walks during the Great Backyard Bird Count, and we'll also be promoting some other events happening in the islands during that time. I'm really honored to introduce Tyler Davis tonight. He is an expert birder. He's been birding since he was a kid and has been all over the world looking for birds. He has been a director at a safari lodge in Kenya and has worked as a wildlife naturalist both here locally and as far away as Australia. Tyler's enthusiasm for birds is very contagious, and I may have witnessed this, but I know that sometimes he sits down for dinner with his binoculars on at the dinner table. He loves birds. So thank you, Tyler, for giving this talk tonight, and thank you everybody for joining online.
Cool, thank you, Margot. Evening, everyone. Yeah, what a pleasure to be here. Thanks for coming. I know that the conditions are a little bit challenging, so glad that we could do this online as well for those who couldn't make it and still get to join in. This is great. This is fun for me. Get to talk about birds. I do it a lot. Some people get tired of it, but this is nice to have an audience who came specifically to hear me do it, and I don't have to be self-conscious about it. It's great. So the whole idea of this talk, Birding 101, is just to really look at the basics of birding. Really boiling it down to the basics and do an introduction to birding and birds and why those of us who do it, and why I think more people should be getting into it. This is a quick overview of what I'll cover. Really simply, what is birding, why birding, basic tools for birding so we can take with us into the field or even just from home. Some basic tips for identifying birds. I'll share 10 local birds that I think are good to know. We're going to use some of those identifying tips and tricks, apply them to some local birds. And then some opportunities to go out in the field and do some birding. And then finally we'll end with some question and answer. If anybody's got some questions, fire my way. That's some of the most fun for me. So quickly, what is birding? Seems like that's a pretty straightforward answer, but turn bird into a verb. So you ask 10 different people what that means, you'll probably get 10 different answers. There's lots of different ways to go birding, from just natural, innate curiosity, being curious of what's out there in the natural world, to a hardcore 24 hours, seeing as many birds as you possibly can in a 24-hour period. That's what that group of guys in the upper corner did. I don't know who that guy is, but he was a serious researcher at one point doing bird research. That's considered birding. Could just be sitting in your kitchen looking out the window at your bird feeder. That's birding. So I think as long as you're enjoying birds in nature, wild birds in nature, whatever capacity, that's considered birding. What's great about it is that it's accessible to so many people in so many different ways. It can mean many different things, it's all birding. Why birding? I think again, like if you were to ask maybe even 100 different people why birding, why they like birding, you get 100 different answers. There's so many different things that attract us to birds and birding. But I think that there are a few really kind of key things. The first of which is that it's an opportunity to connect with nature, really kind of gain a deeper appreciation for the environment. Birds are pervasive throughout wherever we go in life. There are birds, and so it always affords us this opportunity, wherever we are in life, how we're feeling, to immediately reconnect with nature by seeing and appreciating birds. There are studies that have shown that birding actually improves mental health and well-being through lowering stress, through being more mindful of what's around us, and just being more kind of connected and present. So pretty cool. There's been empirical studies on birding that have shown that. There's a conservation impact too with birding that is, I think, worth noting. Margot mentioned it from kind of a citizen science aspect, that if we go out and we bird and we contribute that to various citizen science platforms, that creates a bigger wealth of knowledge that scientists can draw from and learn about bird populations and patterns. So we can all contribute to that. That's another key reason to go birding. Also, if we travel for birding, then we are contributing to local economies in various ways, whether it be domestic or abroad, especially in a lot of developing countries, that can be the difference between saving a forest or not. If a local community in a developing country sees that there's value in conserving that tract of land for the birds that are there because people want to come see them. Also, what's good about birding is you can do it anywhere, anytime. Like, birds are worldwide, from the South Pole to flying over Mount Everest to even living in caves. There's birds everywhere. So no matter where you go, you can be birding, which means you can never be bored again, which is, I think, one of the reasons that I really enjoy it. Like, I can always look outside and see a bird. And perhaps the best reason of all is that you don't need a reason. Why do you need a reason to go birding? You don't. It's just, you can just do it for the joy of birds. For me, this is like the key for birding. You can just it's like breathing. You can just exist and enjoy it. I've shared this picture here of this bird. It's called a rainbow lorikeet, and this is how I got into birding. So again, ask 100 people why they got into birding. You'll get 100 different answers. A lot of those people might relate what we refer to as a spark bird. Like, oh, I saw this one bird, and that's what sparked it. This is my spark bird, rainbow lorikeet, and it happened when I was 12 in Australia. I was in Cairns in northeast Australia, and I saw parrots flying around downtown Cairns. And as a 12-year-old American, I was like, wow, that is so cool to see these bright, flashy parrots. I have to know what they are. And I told my mom this, and so she went out and she bought me this book, this exact book. This is the one that I carried with me for the next 2.5 months in Australia, and I learned that through looking through this field guide, that was a rainbow lorikeet. And then I had this field guide for 2.5 months driving around Australia, and it was kind of like a game. Like, there's like so many cool, colorful birds in here, and I see a bird and find it, and then eventually was looking through the book, wanting to see the birds that were in here, and so started kind of like changing my behavior around looking for birds. So for me, that's why I go birding, is that bird there. That was my spark bird. It got me interested in the whole thing, and it's been chaos ever since. Cool. Let's dive into some basic tools for birding. Again, like, one of the wonderful things about birding is how simple it is. You don't really need much. At the most basic level, all you need are your eyes and or your ears. You can get outside, you can watch birds, or stay inside and watch them through your window. This is actually kind of a cool way to go out and experience birds. Is not to take any tools with you sometimes. Don't take your binoculars, don't take your field guide, don't take your phone. Just be present and enjoy birds. But if you're kind of kicking it up a notch, then obviously you want to have some binoculars with us. It's kind of like the core birding tool. I'm going to talk a little bit more about binoculars later, because not all binoculars are created equal. A field guide is pretty important too, so that you can identify what you're looking at. However, it's not totally necessary. Again, some people for birding is just the joy of seeing birds, just watching them. You don't have to know what they are, and that's totally cool. That's totally fine. If you want to start to get to know what species you're looking at, having a field guide is pretty important. There's a lot of different field guides out there. Everybody's got their favorite. Probably the most widespread, widely used one in North America is that one in the middle, Sibley. And as I'll get to in a second, there's an app version of that as well that's really useful. Field notebooks is kind of like the next step. This isn't something that is like totally necessary, but as you get more into birding, you might realize that you want to sketches of birds or write notes about what you see. These are examples of notes from when I was a kid, taking notes in my backyard about birds, and it's kind of cool to go back and look at those, and it really helps ingrain some of what you're learning and observing into the field if you have a notebook to make notes. And then those apps, so things you can have on your phone. This is such a cool development in the world of birding, having apps on hand instead of having like all these books and carrying around a backpack like I used to do. I've just got it all here in my pocket now. It's fantastic. These are the 3 apps I use the most. Again, this middle one, that's the digital version of this book with the added benefit that it's got sounds of all the birds. Super cool. It is, you have to pay money for that one. That's, I think, $20 through the App Store. The one on top, which is from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, Merlin, also an identification app, but it's free, so that's super cool. So you don't have to pay for that one. That's an amazing free service. It has the added benefit of sounds, as does the Sibley Guide, but it also can, through your phone, has a feature that you can record the bird sounds, and it's telling you what you're hearing, which is like still mind-blowing to me, even though I've been using it for several years now. Pretty cool, can do that. It's not 100% accurate, so you do have to be mindful of that. You can't rely on it completely to identify the birds for you, but it's like 98% accurate. It's pretty good. And I use that all the time. It's really, really helpful. And I think too, when you are birding and in the field, looking at a bird, hearing a bird, when you can put those 2 things together, it really helps ingrain it so that the next time you go out, you might hear something and not see it, but you still then know what it is because you made that connection. And then eBird, this last one here, this is the citizen science platform that I use most frequently. It's what the Great Backyard Bird Count uses and has been using since 2013 to kind of assimilate all their data in one place. And what's nice about eBird is that in addition to contributing to citizen science, it's also summarizing all your sightings. So you have a profile, tells you how many birds you've seen. You can filter it by year, by location, all kinds of different ways to look at your personal data. Some people like that, other people it's not a big deal, but if you like keeping lists, it helps keep your lists for you. And there are a lot of listers out there who like to just increase the number of birds that they see on their life list or their San Juan County list or whatever it may be. I'm one of those people. I enjoy doing that. All right, let's talk a little more about binoculars. So, like I said before, not all binoculars are created equal. We'll start with kind of like the 2 basic designs of binoculars. This is called a roof prism style. This is like your more classic, old school style. It's called a Poro prism. Generally speaking, better binoculars are going to be the roof prism style. And that lends itself to being more compact. You can see the Poro prism's pretty bulky. And just the way that binocular design has gone is that the better manufacturers of binoculars do the roof prism style, and so that's generally going to be the better quality binoculars. They use better glass in the optics. So if you're in the market for binoculars, I would sway you from doing the Poro prism and go for the roof prism. It's also just a lot more versatile, being more compact. You can take it with you, traveling and things like that. A couple other things to note on binoculars. You'll see these numbers a lot, blank by blank, 8 by 42, 10 by 42, 8 by 32. And what those numbers refer to is the first number is the magnification power. So 8x, that's 8 times closer, bringing it closer to you, the object. And then this is the objective diameter of the lens here. This is the diameter of the objective lens. This is the lens on the outside. And the bigger the lens, the more glass, the more light it's going to be letting in. So this is showing an 8x42. By comparison, 8x32 has a smaller objective lens that's not going to let in as much light. So in lower light conditions, it's going to be harder to see. Even in kind of normal light conditions, the image won't be as bright in your eye. If you're looking at these binoculars online, like Amazon or B&H or something, you'll notice that as this number goes up, generally the price goes up. This number doesn't matter as much. So an 8x versus a 10x binocular, that increase in magnification isn't going to affect the price of the binocular very much. The objective lens, that's going to have the impact. By sometimes like hundreds of dollars by increasing from 32 to 42. It's more glass, and better optics. And yeah, I could do a whole presentation on almost any one of these topics. Binoculars we could go deep into. I don't want to right now, but I will say that if you're in the market for binoculars, I would avoid anything that's kind of under the $300 mark because the quality starts to drop off pretty quickly. You can sometimes find good deals on some pretty good quality binoculars around $250. But really in that like $300 to $400 range is kind of a sweet spot for getting good value binoculars that are really pretty quality. And then if you are crazy about it, you can get up into like the $2,500 to $3,000 pairs of binoculars from like Swarovski or Leica or Zeiss. But for most people, I would recommend, don't go under that 250 mark, 300 mark, because the quality starts to drop off. And it's not so much the quality of the optics; it's the quality of the construction. So you're going to spend. I think you're saving money spending $100 or $150, and the binoculars are going to last you a year or two. Rather go up a level, spend $250, $300, have binoculars are going to last you a lifetime, and be pretty good quality. All right, let's talk a little bit about how to identify birds. Again, could spend a whole evening just talking about this, so we're going to keep it pretty basic. I included this photo because it kind of is a good introduction to one of the first things I'm going to talk about when it comes to bird identification. Even though this is just a silhouette, I have a feeling most of you could identify at least what type of bird this is just by looking at it. Any guesses? Hummingbird, yeah, awesome. So we call that being able to look at just like a silhouette or just like the general impression of the size and shape of a bird. We call that the gis or the jizz, and that is looking at a bird and being able to identify what it is or like roughly what it is by your general impression of the size and shape. So like this spoonbill versus these ducks. Generally speaking, you can tell there's a difference, even if you don't know what the species are. And the size of the African spoonbill, much taller, longer legs, that crazy bill, and these white-faced whistling ducks, much smaller, a little more compact, not nearly as tall. So that general impression of size and shape is like the first immediate thing that you can kind of pay attention to, gives you some idea of where to go next. Which would be to look at some features that the bird has. So like in the previous example, that big spatula bill that the spoonbill had, crazy feature, really noticeable. But generally like the beak, legs, the feet, tail, wings, sometimes the eyes are all good features to look at to help you narrow things down a little bit farther. So like in the case of this Martial eagle, massive, like meat-tearing beak, so pretty good indicator that's a raptor of some kind, a bird of prey. If you can see its feet, it's got big talons. It doesn't have long legs. If it's flying, it's got a massive wingspan. So these kinds of features can really help narrow it down. Other things you might look for with the tail is if it's long or short. That could be just generally speaking long or short, or it could be relative to the rest of the body. Look at the beak, and is it long? Is it conical? Is it sharp? Does it have a D curve to it or a recurve to it? All kinds of different things that can be pretty immediately assessed by looking at just a few areas of the bird. Again, the beak, the legs, tail, wings, and sometimes the eyes. And then you can kind of work down from there and you look at the colors and patterns. A bird like the song sparrow is always pretty patterned. lots of markings down the front, markings on the back. Even though it's in gray and brown tones, kind of earth tones, the patterns are pretty distinctive. It's got that eye stripe, it's got a nice gray supercilium or stripe above the eye. And other birds will be patterned very differently, even though they'll have a similar shape. So other sparrows will have different patterns, different colors. And it's subtle, and it can take some time to pick them apart, but as we're kind of working down from the general impression, size, and shape, and then looking at some of those key features, then getting into the colors and patterns, is how we start to drill down further into these bird groups that can be difficult to identify from each other. Habits and behavior obviously can lend a lot to identifying birds that are active at night versus the daytime, birds that are kind of slow and stationary or perched for long periods of time and they sally out and come back, or birds that are really active, hyperactive, or birds that are always bouncing on the grass. These things can help tell us what type of family the birds are in as well, and then we can work our way from there to identify this species. And same with the habitat. A bird like this Baird sandpiper, typically found along shorelines near water. It'd be weird to find it in a forest. Similarly, it'd be weird to find a tanager who likes the forest down by the shoreline. So habitat is often really helpful to consider what species you're looking at. And then lastly, vocalizations and sounds. Birds aren't always vocalizing, they're not always singing or talking, but when they do, that can help. Often when birds get together, like these surf scoters, they get vocal, they chatter, they talk to each other. But not all sounds that birds make are vocalizations. These are a great example. If you've ever been down by like South Beach or American Camp off of Granny's Cove, you get these big flocks of surf scoters down there, and when they all take off at once, they make a really distinctive sound with their wings, kind of like a whistling with their wings. There's other birds like Wilson's snipe that make whinnying sounds with their wings. So these kinds of sounds that birds make, in addition to their vocalizations, can also be really helpful with identification. So let's take a quick look at 10 resident bird species that I think are really cool, common, good ones to know, good ones to keep an eye out for in your backyard. This northern harrier is not one of them, but it is a resident. I didn't include it in the 10. First one, and I will say too that all these 10 that I'm showing, these images are from this book, the Sibley Guide, and it's just the phone version, the app version that I'm sharing here. So credit to David and Sibley, but I also wanted to share what you would see in your phone if you're using that app to identify birds in the field. So the first is a dark-eyed junco, and this bird is prolific right now. Probably if you got a feeder, you're seeing these birds. And even if you don't have a feeder, you probably see them darting across the road, white flash in the tail feathers. And really handsome little sparrow, bright pink beak and that black hood. There's quite a few different races of dark-eyed junco. What we have here is called the Oregon race. There's on the East Coast, if you're from the East Coast, you'd be more familiar with slate-colored juncos. But yeah, wonderful little bird, super common. I had 50 in my yard yesterday, a big flock, all kind of concentrating because of the snow, I think. Another really, really common bird that I'm sure everybody recognizes and knows well is the American robin, common resident that we have here. They move around quite a bit, kind of locally, but they breed here, they winter here, and a nice bird to know. And this next bird, superficially, if we're talking about the general impression, size, and shape, looks very similar. But because of the colors and the patterns, you can tell it's definitely a different species. Not as common as the American robin, but super special when you see it. It's so brilliant. And this is a varied thrush. Has anybody noticed these lately, like in the last couple of days in particular? Yeah, when it snows, they tend to come down out of the forest and be in more open areas. And just on my way here this evening, about 6 or 7 in my yard, right outside my door. Normally they're back in deeper forests, but when it snows, they come out. And here's a bird that superficially, by its colors, kind of looks like a robin, but its general impression, size, and shape is different. It's got a shorter tail relative to its body. It's kind of chunkier. It's got a more conical beak, spotted towhee, wonderful bird. Again, really common at your feeders. Used to be known as a rufous-sided towhee if you've got an older bird book, but one of my favorite birds because they're very active at bird feeders, and make a cute little like mewing noise. It sounds like a cat if you ever are listening for them in your yard, and you'll see them in brambles and near bird feeders all around the island. This is, for me, one of my absolute favorite birds that we have on the island. This is what I consider the best duck. There's lots of good ducks out there. This is the best one. It's a harlequin duck, and it's a year-round resident, although the breeding individuals don't breed around here. They actually go way up in the Cascades, and they breed in Cascade streams, and then they float back down to they come back down to the ocean. But some of them do stay here year-round, and they're just a wonderful duck. A diving sea duck, which you'll see off of any of our rocky shorelines, and they're just, I mean, David Sibley is a really, really good illustrator, but there's no way to do this duck justice from an illustration. You have to see it in the wild. Just a beautiful thing. Good place to look for it would be down at like Cattle Point or Granny's Cove. Really good, easy places to find that bird. Another common one is chestnut-backed chickadee. They are probably more often heard than seen. They're pretty prolific. They're often high up in trees. It's strange here in the San Juans, we don't have many black-capped chickadees, which is kind of a more common species on the mainland, but these guys are everywhere here. And yeah, they're pretty fun to watch. They're very active. You'll find them at your feeder. They love black oil sunflower seeds if you have black oil sunflower seeds at your feeder. And yeah, I think that if you go outside pretty much anywhere on the island, you may not see them, but you'll hear them twittering and saying chickadee above you. Another common one at your feeder is red-breasted nuthatch. These guys are super fun because they're kind of like little acrobats. They'll eat upside down. They work their way up limbs and trees and use that sharp little beak to poke into cracks and crevices. And if we're talking, kind of applying that jizz approach to looking at birds, that really short little tail is really noticeable. That sharp beak's noticeable. They're really small. They're like yay big. And so that's a very kind of a standout species that you'll see at your feeder because nothing else really looks like it. This species is a bird that I think a lot of birders have a love-hate relationship with. This is the bird that if you ever woke up at 4 a.m. on a spring or summer morning by something banging loudly on some neighbor's metal chimney, it's this bird doing that. Northern flicker, they love to make noise to claim territory, and they are woodpeckers, so that's why they bang things. Around here we have the red-shafted form. On the east coast there's the yellow-shafted form. Previously they used to be considered separate species, and they're now considered just different races or subspecies. They have integrate sometimes that can be orange. You get yellow red mixed together creates orange. It does happen. But around here, if you do see one with yellow shafts, it's almost certainly an integrate. They hybridize quite a lot, create these integrates, and for us on the west coast to have a pure yellow shafted flicker would be pretty unusual. Most of ours are red shafted or some form of integrate. I wanted to include a shorebird on here. This is a killdeer. Pretty cool little plover. Here year-round, they breed sometimes in really inconvenient places, in rocky areas like gravel parking lots. Yeah, you see them at our beaches like 4th of July Beach and Jackson's Beach, South Beach, sometimes the Bunny Plains. And this is a bird, like a few birds. In fact, the towhee is one, chickadee's one, flicker's one, kildeer's one. It's onomatopoeic. These are onomatopoeic names. The names come from the noise that they make. Last but not least, one of my favorites, and it's hummingbird. This is the hummingbird that we see year-round coming to our hummingbird feeders. It is the northernmost resident hummingbird in the world. Historically, it was probably found a little bit south of us, but because people have been putting out feeders for a long time, it's actually expanded its year-round range up into Canada and I think as far as southeast Alaska now. even though historically that wouldn't have been the case, but people have definitely helped its expansion. Excuse me, get some water. So I wanted to throw this up there. This is what Margot was talking about with some bird walks that are coming up for the Great Backyard Bird Count. So on the 14th on Lopez, and on the 15th both on Orcas and Salmon Island. And this is kind of in to support the Great Backyard Bird Count, which is happening between the 14th and 17th of this month. And a little bit more on the Great Backyard Bird Count. It's been going on since 1998, and if you go to birdcount.org, you'll get to this landing page, and you can learn more about it. It's a really cool kind of citizen science project that's been going on since 1998. It's the first global, so worldwide, simultaneous, everybody's doing it at the same time, online citizen science project for collecting wild bird data. It's a mouthful, but that's kind of a unique thing, to get everybody in the world doing something simultaneously and then contributing that to a greater science knowledge. It's been happening every February since '98 for 4 consecutive days. And it's really helped scientists better understand global bird populations, and particularly why we do it in February is that birds, I know it seems crazy considering what's happening outside right now, but birds are starting to think about migration already. In the next few weeks, the very first migrants are going to start making their way north. And so doing this in February is helping scientists understand how bird populations are changing, how they're shifting their dates of departure, all kinds of interesting things. So again, there's the dates for those opportunities to go birding. Here are some other opportunities to go birding. So in addition to the Great Backyard Bird Count, which even if you can't join the land bank on their walks, you can do it in your own backyard, you can do it anywhere on the island, anywhere in the world. Highly recommend doing that. You can contribute by going to birdcount.org. You can share your sightings there. Or actually redirect you to eBird to do that, because they can't partner with eBird now. On February 19th, Orcas Island Garden Club has an Attracting Birds to Your Garden presentation. I believe that's virtual as well, Margo?
Both online and in person.
So there's online and in person. Island Rec offers bird walks. Yours truly leads those. Right now, roughly once a month. In spring, we start to do them a little more frequently, and more to come after April. I also lead bird walks at the Sculpture Park from April to October. That is on the first Wednesday of every month. And it's 2 hours, 8 to 10 a.m., really casual. It's free. Of course, Sculpture Park works on donations, so if you feel like donating, you can, but the walks are free, a lot of fun. Pretty fun to see how things change from month to month too, starting in April and going all the way through October. And then Audubon, our local Audubon chapter has some field trips that we're trying to put together, and that's coming up, so keep an eye on the Facebook page for more information there. That's it. So that was a lot. And it really was kind of little also, like it really only covered the tip of the iceberg as far as birding goes, but still a lot. And I wanted to make sure we have enough time for questions. My contact info is there in case anybody has anything they want to write me about. I love receiving questions about identification, like what is this bird, or places to go to see birds locally, globally. Don't hesitate to reach out. Any questions? Yeah.
I have a question about feeders.
Yeah.
And different kinds of feeders, different kinds of seed, and how do you get rid of cowbirds when they show up? And just could you talk about sort of the ethics of feeding them around the year? Because sometimes you're supposed to take them down so that the birds don't pass things to each other. Can you talk about feeders?
Yeah, feeders come up a lot when I'm doing bird walks. People are always interested to ask about feeders. A lot of different ways to feed birds. You can be very targeted, like hummingbirds require specific food. You're never going to see hummingbirds at your suet feeder. So I think kind of like the key or the core types of feeders that we generally have around the Pacific Northwest are hummingbird feeders, which is sugar water made with 4 parts water to 1 part sugar. I would never do more concentrated, like be really harmful to hummingbirds. Don't dye them. Historically, people use red dye to attract them. Don't do that because those food dyes are bad for them as well. Seed feeders for your seed-eating birds, like your sparrows, juncos, towhees. Yeah, mixed seed is great. Including black oil sunflower seeds in the mixed seed is nice because that's a lot of birds love that because of the fat content. You'll find that will attract more birds if your mix has black oil sunflower seeds. And then suet is kind of the third one that we typically see people using around here. In the East Coast, some people will be putting out orange halves, like to bring in orioles and things. We don't see that as much here. So really like suet, seed feeders, and hummingbird feeders are what you'll typically see. As far as leaving them up year round, I don't think that there's really a problem with leaving them up year round. The problem I think occurs when people don't clean them enough. And then birds can spread disease. They can spread salmonella. Obviously the big one right now is avian bird flu. That happens because these areas concentrate birds, but birds will concentrate in the wild too in areas where there's a known food source. And birds are social, so it's not like taking the bird feeder down is going to keep them from being social. It does remove a concentration point, but the better I think option is to just ensure that you're keeping things clean at your bird feeder. One way to kind of avoid contamination too is to, excuse me, spread seed on the ground rather than in a concentrated feeder. So just chuck some seed out on the ground every morning, and that removes the need for a feeder. What were your other questions about bird feeding?
We have quail that come around. So is it okay to feed quail, and would you feed them like millet or sunflower, or what would be good for quail?
Quail like grains, so millet would be good. Cracked corn probably. Black oil sunflower seems rich for quail. But yeah, they like grains and seeds. So whatever you spread on the ground, it's probably like your mixed bird seed from Ace. I think they'll love that, and it's awesome having quail around. They're fun to watch. Make cute noises. Yeah.
Is there a reason they pick up the milo?
Say again?
The little hard red seed, I guess, out of the bird feed. They'll pick all of it but leave those.
Oh, so they're selectively
like
taking them and tossing them aside.
Yeah, you'll see a bunch of them. I think it's milo.
Yeah, I don't know. Birds are like people; they've got preferences, and I have noticed that too. That given options, if birds recognize that there's a better food type within the mixed seed, they will kick away the seed they don't like to get to that food type. I think if you were to offer nothing but that, then they might be more readily accepting of it. But in the mixed seed,
We spilled a bunch on our back porch, and we thought, we'll let the birds pick it up.
Yeah.
And they came in, and all that was left was a red.
Yeah.
It was like nobody likes a red M&M.
Cowbirds. So they found us, and then they told everybody, and then the cowbirds just would come and in a day wipe out, entire feeders full of seed because they were just voracious.
Yeah, I don't have much to tell you about cowbirds. Unfortunately, it's I guess the way of the world. Cowbirds didn't used to be here. They were more of like a Great Plains species, but like a lot of birds that are native, we have contributed to their expansion, and certainly putting out feeders has allowed that to happen. But they are native species, so yeah, goodness, how do you handle that? It's hard to say that native species are. This is a whole other can of worms. We get quickly to the topic of our barred owls, and how there are culling programs being considered for removing barred owls from our ecosystems because they have expanded too much and are wreaking havoc on other native species of owls, like spotted owls, for instance. It's a hard question. What you can do is that if you notice those birds coming in, you just take your feeders down for a while, force them to go look somewhere else. They might come back, but they might not.
We have a question on Facebook.
Yeah.
Wondering if we have any other species of hummingbirds here besides Anna's and is it Rufus?
Yeah. So, not commonly. So the question was, do we have other species besides Annas and Rufus hummingbirds? So Annas are our year-round resident species. Rufus are a migratory species that we typically see showing up in like March, usually with the first bloom of red flowering currant. And they're here through the summer. There are other species of hummingbirds in Washington State, but not usually on the west side of the Cascades. So we have calliope hummingbirds, generally to the east, black-chinned hummingbirds to the east as well. Occasionally an errant hummingbird will show up here though. So one of those species, if they get blown off course or they take a wrong turn or they feel like going walkabout, they might show up over here. And very rarely like just completely random vagrants will show up. But it was, I think, in like 98, maybe late 90s sometime. The Xanthus's hummingbird showed up in southern British Columbia, which is a bird that you don't even find in the southern part of the U.S. It's a bird you find like way south into Mexico, Central America, and just went the wrong way and wound up in not far from here. It's crazy to think about. So, generally speaking, Annas and Rufus are the only two species that we're bound to ever see. An extremely rare exception, maybe another species that gets blown off course. Yeah.
Do you have any hints about how to identify the various hawks and stuff? Because some people can just sort of see their shape and know what they are, and I really struggle to figure out who they are, and they're so far up, and you just see a silhouette.
Yeah, good question. There's a few groups of birds that are kind of notoriously challenging because of similarities between species. Hawks are one, gulls are another, warblers are another, sparrows are another, flycatchers are another. What's nice is a lot of those species, those families have very specific books for identifying species. It's more detailed than just a normal field guide. There are ones for hawks, and often in those books they have plates of silhouettes, so it kind of helps you learn from a book what those silhouettes look like, what are the subtle differences. Generally speaking, when it comes to raptors, long pointed wings are falcons, shorter rounded wings are the accipiters, like our cougars and sharp-shinned hawks or goshawks, and then kind of in between are buteos, which are like our red-tailed hawks. This time of year we might see rough-legged hawks. But yeah, honestly, I think that with a lot of these families of birds that are pretty challenging, it just takes time to be out in the field, repetition of seeing them and kind of working it out in that moment. But these books do help a lot. I just bought this book, actually I got it for Christmas. This just past Christmas, newly came out, the Goal Guide. Gulls are one of the most notoriously challenging groups of birds, and every reference I can get my hands on to help me learn better, I usually pick up because they can be very difficult. Hawks are just that way too, especially like our sharp-shinned and Cooper's hawks. They're very challenging. Even the best birders get stymied by those sometimes. Yeah, I recommend maybe looking at a hawk identification book, and they are regional too. So there's hawks in North America that would be really helpful for learning some of those things better. And those silhouette plates are great because that brings it back to that concept of just general impression of size and shape. That can be applied to birds at large, or can even be applied to family groups. So, the general impression of a kestrel versus an eagle is vastly different. Size is very different. Kestrel has those tapered wings. Eagles have more paddle-like wings, and that would be just in silhouette watching it fly over. You would know the difference immediately, and then it gets trickier as you get to some of those hawks that are similar in size, but there are subtle differences you can learn through a book like that. Yeah, Kim.
What about doves? Are they native to here?
Doves? Good question. There's we have, let's see, 3 species of doves that we see regularly around here. Only one of which is native. So the answer is both. Mourning doves are native, but like the rock pigeons that we see down at the ferry terminal, those are non-native. And then in the last maybe 15 years, we've had this surge of Eurasian collared doves come in as well. I remember as a kid in high school, I drove from Seattle out to Wenatchee to see the first ever Eurasian collared dove like reported in the state, and now they're everywhere. So and it's an interesting invasion that's kind of it reached a peak recently, and actually their numbers have declined a little bit. I'm not sure why that is. Something that happens sometimes with these invasive species. Yeah. Yes.
Here's another question on Facebook asking, have you seen bluebirds beyond the nesting box areas on the San Juan Preservation Trust has established, and do you think the reintroduction has been successful, and how can we continue to improve?
Ooh, wow, really good question. Gosh, I wish someone from the Preservation Trust was here to answer that. It has been successful insofar as that there have been successful nesting pairs, breeding pairs on the island. And that's been an annual thing. I think it was last year, the year before was the first time that it had been observed. Doesn't mean it wasn't happening previously, but first time it had been observed of them using a natural nesting cavity, which is super cool. And having a successful breeding season using a natural cavity. There's lots of bluebird boxes up around, especially like San Juan Valley. The bluebirds are back already. They're looking. Just saw a report a couple days ago of 5 bluebirds in the area. So yeah, I think without the efforts, and it's been quite an effort, we would have fewer bluebirds here than we do now. What's interesting about the bluebirds is we're kind of like at the extra liminal part of their range. So bluebirds are never going to be a common species here. This is not the core of their range. So we are helping the Preservation Trust, and the hard work that they do is helping maintain their range out this far. And I appreciate the work they do, because I think without it, we wouldn't have the bluebirds here. Any other Facebook questions?
Not yet.
Okay. I'll share quickly while we're waiting for anybody else to ask questions. I brought a bunch of my books. I in addition to collecting birds, I collect bird books. I have a selection of a few here, some of which I think are great ones to kind of build a collection from, just like basic birding books, either field guides or books that help learn about birding or learn about bird anatomy. Then I brought some examples of field guides from other parts of the world. Come take a look if you're interested. I'll also add, I brought my spotting scope and my camera because that's kind of like the next tier of getting interested in birds and birding. Just taking photos of them or looking close at them from very far away, especially those ones like the gulls, or the shorebirds, the hawks. Having a spotting scope to really study them is really, really helpful. And yeah, they're not essential birding items, but as you get more obsessed, you might find yourself wanting more gear.
Do you have a guide that you find that's good for San Juan Islands?
Like a field guide?
Yeah.
So there's this book that's been around for a really long time called Birding the San Juan Islands. It's not a field guide per se, but it does give good information about locations to go birding, species you can expect to find. For me, the field guide I use is this version in my pocket. It's a Sibley guide, and I've got the app on my phone, and that's what I find to be the most useful. You can filter it on your phone too to be like just birds of Washington. So yeah, I don't think you can do it by county, but you can do it by state, and that helps narrow things down. Any other questions?
I know as far as the library collection, we do have some specific like local books that are here. I totally forgot we had bird books over here. And then a bunch of bird books back there as well that are available through the collection.
careful with books. Suddenly you have 170 of them at home, and your wife starts to question your sanity. Yeah.
Which are the bird walks that you do?
I do bird walks with Island Rec, and there's the dates for some Island Rec bird walks coming up. April 10th one's going to shift. I had a conflict just come up for that one, yeah, there will be more to come. Island Rec does it in seasons, so there will be some more in May as well eventually, and then I do ones at the Sculpture Park as well. And then there'll be ones coming up through Audubon eventually too. Audubon's in a transition phase, and yeah, kind of revamping some things, and we'll have some announcements of field trips soon.
Does it say, maybe I'm missing it, came in late, what time on the first Wednesday?
What's that?
What time?
Oh, it's 8 a.m. 8 to 10 a.m. first Wednesday. Yeah, sorry, should have included that. 8 to 10. Well, if there's other questions, I'm still here if you want to come ask me questions afterwards. Come up, check out the books, ask me any questions, happy to chat. Thank you all for coming. Really appreciate you making the trip out here in the conditions, and really glad that those of you online took the time to join us online as well. Appreciate it very much.